Hi, I'm Phil Schmick. Welcome to 30 Minutes. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about healthcare trends in America. That's something near and very dear to my heart and probably to you too. Did you know that we spend $2.7 trillion a year in healthcare spending? Trillions, when it gets to trillions, for me, it's a nebulous figure, so let's put it in other terms. Right now, we're spending about 17% of all spending, public and private, in this country each year on healthcare. What's worse, over the next 2 years, that is going to increase to almost 20%. 20% of all spending in this country is going to be dedicated to healthcare. Worse, 20 to 30% of that spending is wasteful. It's about $800 billion. It's redundant, it's inefficient, and we don't seem to be able to do much about it. Who's and what are the culprits in this skyrocketing healthcare cost? Well, the first one you probably know, higher prices for medical services, but there's higher prices for everything from, well, not gas, but from food to clothes to everything else. So why not medical services? Paying for volume over value. What does that mean? I'll get into that, but the idea is that there are more and more Americans, we baby boomers, are going into hospitals, seeing doctors, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a volume increase over value. Defensive medicine takes up a lot of that spending. Defensive medicine, those are chronic illnesses, things like cancer, diabetes, obesity, things like that. And then there's the new technology craze, okay? The Apple Watch isn't the only thing in technology that it must have. Doctors, hospitals, whatever, they love new technology, whether it's needed or not for the patient. And then finally, there's a stunning lack of information on prices for services and the quality of the services and the quantity. Now, I looked into this, and I'll tell you why in a little while, but medical research and development plus new technology, and when I say technology, I mean procedures, equipments, new drugs, they account for half of all the long-term spending in the medical services business. Now, should we cut that? Should we cut that down? Well, the positives of that spending is that Americans now have much better access to new technologies than any other country in the world. Would you like to give that up? American medicine, too, is the originator of the vast majority of healthcare innovations worldwide. Would you like to give that up? Now, administrative costs. As you know, the bureaucracy grows and grows and grows. 31% of spending in healthcare is earmarked for administration. Administration, what does that mean? That means your insurance company, your employer's healthcare insurance benefits, hospitals, doctors, nursing homes, home care agencies, things like that. The larger and larger bureaucracy just simply reflects, as I said, us baby boomers, the volume of people that are using our medical system, and that's going to increase as baby boomers get older and older. Should we give up the administration? Okay, well, I found out that Americans spend less time waiting for care than Europe or Canada, two areas that seem to have a great healthcare system. And not only that, but once we do get service, we're really satisfied with the care we receive. You want to give that up? How about chronic diseases? A lot of money goes into defensive spending. It accounts for about 75% of all of our health care costs. What are they? I mentioned some: cancer, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, illnesses as a result of smoking, things like that, okay? Well, all right, should we cut down on that defensive spending? Well, I took some looks at some statistics on that issue as well, and when I found out that for those cancer patients, we have a better survival rate here in this country than Europe does. And less people die here than, say, Canada from cancer. We do have a lot better access to chronic treatment of diseases than any other developed country. And as far as cancer screening, you know, our system beats hands down any other country in the developed areas. So, again, do we want to give up that? I said the lack of transparency on cost and prices. And this is interesting. If I said to you right now, how much does a broken arm, will that cost you from beginning to end? Raise your hand if you know. I don't see anybody. How about a knee replacement? Does anybody out there know what your knee would cost to get it replaced? How about an x-ray? Do you know what an x-ray costs? Well, you're a consumer. Why don't you know these things? You know what an Apple Watch would cost you? Well, there's an answer. The answer is that 48% of Americans get their medical services through an insurance program that their employer provides. You pay the premium, you get the medical service. You may not know what your deductible is, but that's about as far as you're going to go, because in your mind, all that medical service that you're getting, regardless of the illness, is free. Well, it isn't free. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you that the employer-sponsored health care costs have grown 69% over the last 10 years. Now you, who have to pay part of those employee-sponsored health care programs, your contribution has grown 81% in the same 10 years. The annual cost, roughly, for a company to insure his worker or his workers are $16,834 a year. The average worker contributes $4,823 of that, okay? But that's only the beginning, okay? Because you're insured, 48% of us are insured, but 41 million Americans are not insured at last count. Now, 41 million, I'd say 8 out of 10 of those families are low-income families. 6 out of 10 of those families of uninsured people are 200% or more below the poverty line. Almost 1/3 of uninsured Americans go without needed medical care due to cost. They don't go to the doctors. They won't go to the doctors because they don't have the money to go. And whatever disease that they have will just get worse and worse and worse until finally they're rushed to the hospital. They go into the emergency room. By then, whatever's wrong with them has become terrible. The cost to fix it goes through the roof. And the time it takes to fix it, if it is fixed, is forever. Now, how much does that cost us? It costs us $86 billion a year, uninsured health, people that have approached the hospitals and medical services that have no insurance. $86 billion a year. Now, the hospitals and doctors, they bear the brunt of that $86 billion. In fact, 55% of emergency care nationwide is never paid. It's uncompensated. Okay, what happens to it? The hospitals eat it, the doctors eat it. It's a loss for them, and you think that's the end of it, but it isn't, okay? Because what happens is the cost of the services that they have to provide you and I go up as a result. And if our costs go up, our premiums go up. And that's truly what's going on. Now, we haven't even talked about illegal immigrants, okay? If you want to add the uninsured medical services that they are provided, add another $5 billion to the number, the $86 billion I've already told you about, $91 billion a year. And that is growing like topsy. That'll end up costing us almost $50 billion over the next 5 years. As I said, healthcare providers eat these losses, but they do pass on the costs to us through insurance. And our premiums go up, and the services and costs that we need go up as well. So I looked at it. And basically, there's a direct correlation between the amount that insurance premiums that you pay rise in tandem with the higher cost that the hospitals need. Now, you could blame the hospitals or the doctors for passing on these costs, but let's face it, most hospitals are not nonprofit, okay? If they were to be forced to eat these uncompensated costs year in, year out, they'd have to close their doors. They simply would, and you'd have no medical services. So it doesn't answer the question to say put price controls on hospitals or price controls on doctors, because if you do, you won't have them, unfortunately. Now, insurance companies, they keep a pretty tight rein on what the hospitals and the doctors and the medical community can charge for various operations, various services, okay? So what happens, therefore, if the hospitals and the medical community and services, they raise their rates to the point where the insurance company will pay them and then no more? Well, what happens? They still haven't recovered all their uncompensated losses. So what do? What they do is they write it off as a loss. And what happens when that loss goes to the IRS? Well, they pay less taxes. All right, but there's still the cost. Who pays the cost? We do as taxpayers. So not only are you paying higher premiums at work, okay, and higher copays, but any other uncompensated losses you're paying for as a taxpayer. That's another hidden tax. Now, I'm not going to get into the controversy over the Affordable Care Act, okay? There's too much controversy over it anyway. But here's a question. What other system has anyone presented that is going to reduce the number of people who do not have insurance? They don't stop going to the hospitals. They don't stop getting sick. Okay, well, you might say, well, let's just not treat them. All right, answer me this. You're driving down the road, and in front of you, you see a 13-year-old boy get hit by a car. The car keeps going. The boy's laying there, his legs crooked, his arms crooked, he's got a cut in his head, and you stop. What are you going to do? Are you going to ask him if he's insured, if his parents are going to be insured? The first thing you're going to do is pick him up in your arms, put him in the back seat, and where? Rush to the emergencies. Yes, the emergency room. And are they going to stop before they treat him and say, are you insured? What's your insurance company? They're going to treat him. Would you have it any other way? No, you wouldn't have it. I'd say 9 out of 10 Americans, if not 10 out of 10 Americans, are so good-hearted that if they see somebody in a medical problem, they'll be the first to get out of their car. They'll be the first to help them to the hospital. So the answer to the question of what do we do with the 41 million uninsured Americans, we're not going to stop paying for their health benefits. We're not, okay? I don't care what anyone says. We need a system, some system, any system that is going to convince or force or cajole those Americans into getting health care insurance. Now, the Affordable Care Act, so far from what I gather, it's not perfect, and I'm not saying it is perfect. It could be tinkered with for years to come. Okay, Social Security back in the 30s, when that first came out, it was a mess. It took years of tinkering with it before it became the system it is today, and I'm sure the Affordable Care Act or something like it will take as long. But the point is, 8 million Americans who were uninsured prior to that act are now insured. It's not the solution. We got a long way to go, but at least something's doing something about it. But what can you do about it? What can you do about it personally? Well, I had a lesson myself. I call it my $40,000 knee. 3 months ago, I had my knee replaced, okay? I'm just one of 7 million Americans that have had either a hip or a knee joint replacement. And every year, I think the statistics are another 1 million people are going to get some sort of joint replacement. And figure, baby boomers, that makes sense, right? What are the causes of hip joint, knee joint replacement? Arthritis, obesity, and active lives. And it might surprise you to know that the real growth rate in joint replacement is not people over 65, it's between 45 and 64 years of age. In fact, all hip replacements were done last year with people under the age of 65, and that's going to continue. Now, let's look at this because I had to, okay? I did my homework on my knee replacement. What I found is that knee replacements today last 20 to 25 years versus 10 to 12 years just a decade ago. Okay, so how did that happen? That happened through a lot of research and development, a lot of upfront cost, the technology in the new knee, the procedure in the new knee replacements, just wonderful advancements, okay? But here's the thing. I tried to find out how much does my knee cost to manufacture, or a hip to manufacture out of the plant. It's a really closely knit secret. In fact, it's so closely knit that the companies make the hospitals, before they sell them a joint replacement, before they even sell it to them, they have to write a contract with the company not to reveal how much it cost. Well, I did as much research as I could, and I'm figuring this, that your hip replacement, the artificial hip, will probably cost, without R&D, $400 or $500 to manufacture. A knee is a little more complicated. It probably costs closer to $1,000. But as I said, that's the cost of just simply manufacturing it. That doesn't include all billions of dollars in research and development that went into getting that knee to last double the time it did 10 years ago, okay, and other features of it. So they also charge that as well, okay? So I'll do some more research on this in a little bit of time, and I've come up to some understanding, but let's get back to my knee surgery, okay? Buyer beware. What do I mean? Surgery costs, not just for your knee or your hip replacement, and all surgeries vary widely across the nation. And higher charges in a hospital for this operation or that operation doesn't necessarily equate to a better outcome, okay? It could be a worse outcome. I found out that a replacement, my knee replacement, can cost as little as $12,000 in places like Montgomery, Alabama. And yet I found hospitals in California and in Colorado that have charged over $200,000 for the same operation, for the same knee implant. Now, what I found was that hospitals will charge what the insurance company or you, the consumer, will bear. That's the truth, okay? And it's hard to believe, but that's true. And then I've delved even deeper. Okay, because I got my knee done locally in Berkshire Medical Center in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, which isn't what you would call a big urban center, right? Well, what I found out, at least for joint replacements, and this is the things you have to start working on, is that in a hospital study of like over 2,700 hospitals, hospitals that performed over 200 joint surgeries a year had much lower rates of infection, heart attacks, serious complications, and death than hospitals that did less than 200. Now, my particular hospital, they do almost 400 a year. They have an orthopedic center that only does joint replacements. From the janitor up to the doctor, everything is dedicated just to joint replacements, okay? And as I said, they do almost 400 a year. And by the way, it came out wonderful. If this wasn't family TV, I'd show you my scars, but nonetheless, it came out wonderful. But I didn't just fall into this. I did a lot of research. The hospital that I picked was ranked one of the top 100 in the country, even though it's in a very small town. I got second opinions on the doctors, anesthesiologists that I was using. And I'll tell you, these rankings are really important, so you should be taking a look at those. So, I waited until I got my bill, and I've got my bill. This is my bill. It's 7 pages long of itemized expenses, okay? I call it my $40,000 knee. Now, breaking it down, let's go back to that knee implant I was talking about. So I figure it cost maybe $1,000 to manufacture, plus whatever they add in R&D. I'm not sure what the hospital actually paid for that, but I'm guessing somewhere around $5,000. That's a big markup, $1,000 to $5,000. What did it cost me in my itemized bill? It ended up, the implant was roughly $9,500. Yep. That's a big markup, okay? One of the reasons medical services costs are going up, but we've explained why, okay? My knee's going to last me to the rest of my life. All right. Now, the operation, how much did the operation, did you know that they charge by the minute in the operating room? That's right, by the minute. Every minute you're in there, you're charged. Just for the operation room itself, $15,291 of my 40 grand was in the operating room. And that didn't include the recovery room, you know, where they wheel you out to make sure you're all right for an hour or two. That was another $2,300, right? Okay, so how much, and I didn't, the anesthesiologist, separate, $4 grand. That's what it cost. The anesthesiologist and his services. And I'm not saying, this guy was great. He was wonderful. We talked beforehand, great bedside manner, knew exactly what he was doing, $4 grand. So then they wheel me into I had a nice room. You know, nobody was in there, it was just me. Somebody else could have been in there, but it was just me. It was clean, it was wonderful. $900 a night. About equivalent to what I would have spent in a luxury suite, oceanside in Maui, in a resort hotel. $900 a night, or by the time I get out, I think it was 3 nights, it came to almost $2,700. Nice, but not the luxury suite. Then there's physical therapy. Obviously, in any joint, you got to work the range of motion, you got to go to PT, you got to do it, you know, constantly, or you won't get your range of motion back. So, $2,000 so far, and I'm still going. Okay, but that's the physical and occupational therapy. And then if you add in the drugs, medical work, lab work, pharmacology, you add all of that up, that would add up to the rest, okay? 7 pages of expenses. Now, here's a point. Remember I said that the doctors and hospitals, they love this new technology, whether they need it or not? There's this machine that every hospital fell in love with. It was the continuous passive motion machine. What you're supposed to do is you put it on your leg, and I guess you wind it up or turn it on, and it actually flexes your knee for you, okay? Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The cheapest kind of handheld one cost about $250. The more expensive, $2,500, okay? Well, my hospital and the orthopedics that I worked with, they did studies on this thing, the CPM, and honestly what they concluded was that there was no difference in the range of motion, there was no difference in any recovery if you just moved your knee up and down as you were supposed to or used the CPM. There's another example of unneeded technology, but it hit the country, all the hospitals. It was a rage for years, even though we found out that it was no more or no less than your just elbow grease that you take. So, what are these lessons that I've learned on this, okay? Well, the first one you can figure out is you have to ask questions, okay? You got to do your homework. And where does that start? That starts with your insurance company. They all have phone numbers, they all have customer services, they all have people who are trained not to talk in medical geek to you, but to tell you dollars and cents what your best choices are. How many of you out there have ever called your insurance provider with anything like information? You might call them to find what your copay is. Most people don't even do that. But God forbid that if you were thinking that you'd have to get a knee replaced or cancer treatment, has any one of you ever called your insurance company and asked them what were the best ways? Where would you find the best hospitals, the best doctors? They are extremely helpful and they're on your side. Why? Because if you make better choices, 2 things occur. You'll probably, the cost of your health services are going to go down because you'll pick the best providers at the least cost, because that's what you're going to do. And the outcome of whatever the surgery that you select is going to be greater because you're going to be an informed consumer. I don't want to bore you with horror stories about my own knee, but just recently, a guy 70-some years old, in upstate New York, went to supposedly a great hospital, a doctor. He's been in the hospital a month. He developed sepsis, okay? Almost died. Why? There was an error in the operation, okay? He didn't even want to go in, okay, but he did. So outcomes can change. Now, was it the doctor? Was it the procedure? Was the fact that the hospital they used did less than 200 operations a year, or was it just bad luck? I don't know the questions, okay, or the answers to any of that, but he should have at least investigated, and he did not. Look at my sister. My sister, July of last year, she came down with colon cancer, okay, bad, okay. So she had 6 months of chemotherapy and radiation after that. I won't tell you where she was, but she just went to the local hospital, did no research. When they were trying to put some sort of small disc into her chest to monitor the effects of the radiation or the chemotherapy, they separated her lung from the lung wall. It was a mistake. She walked around for a week panting and terrible pain, and then was rushed to the hospital, okay, and she narrowly avoided dying, all right? These kinds of things, if you don't ask the proper questions, and you may not know what the proper questions are, that's where your insurance company comes in, and they're very helpful, okay? Always, always get a second opinion. No matter who the doctor is, the hospital is, you've got to do your homework. Get a second opinion, okay? It's more effort, but it always pays in the end. I did that with my knee. Great doctor, first one, yada, yada, yada. He said I had a terrible knee, I needed a new knee replacement. Did my homework, asked around, found another guy that I loved. I'll tell you his name is Sprague. He's a great guy. Interviewed him, picked him on the spot. We got along, he did a perfect job. By the way, my $40,000 knee, my deductible for the whole thing, you know, all these pages I showed you, $1,000, okay? Not bad, okay? Of course, I had to pay $1,000, and nobody's comfortable paying $1,000, Jesus. But I had to, but it was better than paying 40 grand. So, you gotta understand your options. I know that the medical business, the medical services, it's a daunting prospect, okay? We're not comfortable with it. We're not comfortable with the technology of it. We don't even know the names of these things. I couldn't understand half of what I paid for. I have no idea what it is. I needed to sit down with somebody who interpreted what each one of those line items were, okay? But it's still necessary. You have to understand your options, both on the cost side and on the health side. You have to take control of your health, take control of your life. If you're smoking, obviously you gotta quit, okay? You know it's killing you. If you're overweight, you know you gotta lose weight. Why? Because it's killing you, okay? If you're insured, that's not the end of the line for any of us. It's the beginning of the line. And as you get older, you're going to access the medical services and providers more and more and more. So get used to it. It's something you just have to do. Me, I'm getting used to it too. I have to tell you that in my case, they x-rayed my right knee, okay? It was shot, completely shot. Nobody thought to x-ray my left knee, okay? Now, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, if my right knee is so bad, what about my left knee? It's been running around with my right knee all my life. So I asked for an x-ray. Oh, sure. Come to find out, yeah, my left knee is shot too. Not as bad as my right, but this time next year, guess who's going back into the hospital? But this time, for my left knee, I'm prepared. and I want you to be prepared too. Thank you very much.